Cam Rising did not play at all for Utah in 2023. But if he had, what would the record have been? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments. You can follow our show on Twitter at Locked On Utes. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by the host of the Locked On Pac-12 podcast, Spencer McLaughlin. And Spencer, this past season, yes,
Pac-2. It's Pac. Right there. There it is.
Oh, wow. Hey, good.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that. I'm gonna hold my hand here for all 20 minutes, and the people who are listening on a podcast have no idea what's going on right now. And guess what? You'll never know.
That's why you got to get the double taste on YouTube. You get both the visual and the audio cues. But talking about this Utah team, it was a very disappointing season, obviously, for Utah, because so many of the goals and the things that just were on the table for Utah were never really actually even put on the table because Cam Rising and Brant Kuithe never played. Therefore, your ceiling was drastically lowered. But if Cam did play, and I do want to include Brant Kuithe in this as well, because I think Brant Kuithe is a game changer. I really think having him healthy would have massively affected the impact of some of these games when you have a quarterback like Cam Rising who's able to effectively get him the ball. So when looking back, we're going to go week by week, talk about some of these games, spend a lot less time on the ones that Utah didn't even need Cam Rising to win, and then talk about the ones of how Cam's presence would have affected. I think first, just starting off with the season opener. Oh, how glorious would it have been to have Cam Rising? The highlight of that game was Bryson Barnes' 70-yard touchdown to Money Parks. Ironically, kind of ended up being the highlights of Utah's season, but just like that could have been not bombs the entire game, but big plays the entire game. I think Utah steamrolls Florida by even more if you have Cam Rising in there. Obviously, Utah still takes care of business against Baylor, Weber State, and I mean the defense for Utah scored 7 points against UCLA, and the offense, all they needed to do was muster one drive. They were able to do it. They squeezed that one out 14-7. So then we arrive at Utah's very first loss, 21-7 versus Oregon State. Corvallis, very challenging place to play, but this is one where I'm going to go Cam Rising makes the difference for Utah. This was a 21-7 game, as I highlighted. You saw even how much when Bryson Barnes was in the game, things changed a little bit for Utah, and they were able to have a little bit of offensive momentum through the air. I think the combination of Vele on the outside being utilized more in the season because Cam's healthy and Brant Kuithe there would allow Utah to get the edge in this game too. Let's also not mention that I really like this Oregon State team, but they did lose to the three best teams they played, that being Washington, Oregon, and when I say the three best, I'm including Arizona in that, because Arizona ended up being a much better team than the UCLA ranked team they had beaten at that time. So I do think Utah, with a healthy Cam Rising and the plays that we've seen him make, in addition to Brant Kuithe, would have beaten Oregon State if Cam had been healthy this year.
I think it can be hard to adjudicate, a what if like this with, if a player had been there, would this have happened? But in this instance,
it's the whole theme of the episode, so thank you for crushing my idea in the first 10 seconds we let you speak. Thanks, Spencer.
I said can be hard. I didn't say always is hard, but you need look no further than the Red River shootout or showdown, whatever they're calling it now. They just got rid of the word rivalry because Red River rivalry is a triple alliteration. It's hard to say and it sounds funny. Yeah, anyway, Texas, Oklahoma. A year ago, that game, 49-0. And then in 2023, one guy changes that score. Doesn't just make it close, wins them the game. That's now Oregon quarterback Dylan Gabriel. So one quarterback, I think a lot of people could talk, in a quick or in a quip sort of fashion and say, well, it would move the point spread like 3 or 4 points, which is historically true. Non-quarterbacks are typically worth no more than a point. And quarterbacks can be worth anywhere from 3 to, in college, they could be worth, 5 to 10 points in the spread, maybe even more. However, that does not mean that the outcome can't be changed because, as I said, 49-0, it does not get more dominant than that, really, for two teams that are usually playing at the same level, Texas and Oklahoma. But bringing it back to this Oregon State game, I don't think you can guarantee a win, but gosh almighty, you can guarantee more than 7 points. You can guarantee more than 7 points. And typically when Utah held a team under 30, they won the football game. That was a consistent theme. That is a consistent theme in college football, unless you're Iowa, because Iowa sucks. But I'm sorry, Iowa. That was unnecessarily mean.
Bad.
But your
No,
offense,
no, you know what? They deserve it. That was awful what they made us watch.
your
on
offense, your offense sucks. I hope I'm not breaking news to all the Iowa people listening to or watching the show, but
Yes.
Iowa's offense sucks. I don't know how else to describe it. It's the worst thing I have ever seen. But I think that for Utah, there are definitely some what ifs, and the Oregon State game is one where I definitely feel Cam Rising could have come in and helped them win the football game.
Yeah, to your point about the difference a quarterback can make. Utah this season averaged 23 points per game. Last season with the healthy Cam Rising, they averaged 38 points per game. They had 73 touchdowns, and they had 10 games over 30 points. Those was 30-point games were hard to come by for Bryson Barnes and company at various points throughout the season. So as I mentioned in my going through it for me, I do have Utah beating Oregon State in that scenario. And then, of course, Utah still beats Cal. USC game, even if Cam was healthy, because, they won 34-32, like that one's always going to be thrilling, but of course, I think Cam would have been able to continue his streak alive and beat USC. Would have been, I think it would have been close once again. It just seems like that's how that game was going to tend to go. But that would have been another big legacy game for him, I think, in this offense to stay rolling. And then you get to the Oregon game. And as much as I would love to say, like you said, a quarterback can make a range of a difference. But 35-6 is a lot to overcome. I think this one would have been closer. I actually think it would have actually been a good game. Like, I think going into the season, this was one we even talked about as a potential loss for Utah. This is the type of game to me where Utah would have kept it close. I could see Oregon pulling ahead late or just like taking the lead like in the final minute or something like that. Like a more theatrical version of how I expected Utah to get their first loss at home in the last few seasons, not just by getting absolutely steamrolled with only College Game Day and Fox's number one crew there so that everyone could take it in, just as Utah's getting that little bit of national media exposure. But that Oregon team was so good. Bo Nix was on one that day. He was dealing, and as good as I think Cam Rising would have played here, this is a win for the Ducks.
I'd lean towards that proposition. However, I just cannot shake. I keep bringing it up, but I can't shake 49-0. Like that's just such a dramatic turnaround. And before the season, if Cam Rising had been healthy, this was one of the games that I'd picked Oregon to lose when I did my preseason schedule prediction for the Ducks. I am going 10-2, and Utah was one of the games that I would have had, that I did have them losing. I didn't feel that way once I knew Bryson Barnes was on the field because I liked Oregon's defense a lot, and I thought they would hold Utah, to a sufficiently low number of points. The reason that I thinking back on it, I'd lean towards Oregon does get the win there, though it is certainly a more competitive game, is Cam Rising doesn't play defense. And I think that game, Oregon ended up with 35 points. But if Utah had an offense led by Cam Rising and they'd been scoring more points, Oregon would have scored more points. Because at some point in time, Ty Thompson got into that game, the backup quarterback, by the end of the fourth quarter. And Oregon was kind of taking the foot off the accelerator and just saying, hand the ball off, run the clock. Like it's a 29-point game in the fourth quarter. They don't really have to keep pressing in that sense. I think that, you look at Utah's defense and they were very good once again, but they were very good last year, and USC still came in and put up 42. And I think that Oregon could have done that if Utah had required them to do so. And I think that Oregon team, especially looking back now at what Washington truly is, as they went in and were just outplaying Texas from the jump in that particular game, it was this close to being a blowout. And Texas would not have been able to come back the way that Oregon, did for a moment in the Pac-12 championship game. I think that Oregon was really, really good. And 35-6, though a quarterback can make a world of difference. It's a more competitive game. I do think Oregon still gets that done. They, barely got it done at Autzen last year. That was with Bo Nix on one leg. He was at full strength. This is a better Oregon team, and I think that they would have gotten that game done.
Did forget about that factor too. Cam Rising played probably the worst game of his career at Utah and at Autzen. I think he had like 3 or 4 picks. Like it was rough for him.
I think it was 3. I think it was 3. Bennett Williams had 2, and somebody else.
He dumped one into Dalton's legs. I remember on like
on fourth down. Oh, he had 2 misses on fourth downs late in the game, driving to try to get into field goal range or score the go ahead touchdown. He threw it at Kincaid's legs. He probably makes the first down. And then earlier in the game, they went for it inside Oregon's 15 at 4th and 2 or 3 situation. He locked on to Vele before the snap. Money Parks had off coverage and was wide open underneath for a first down. But yeah, I have not seen Cam Rising play a worse game. I thought it was one of the best games from Oregon's defense in 2022, but defense was really, really good in 2023.
Money's used to being open and not getting the ball. He had to deal with that once again this season at several points. And the last thing I was going to say too is you do make a great point about that Oregon game this year for Utah. Oregon was marching up and down the field, especially early in that game. It felt like they could do whatever they want. They were operating on all cylinders. They could have easily scored more than 35 had they kept their foot on the gas pedal if the Utah offense had required them to keep that foot present, which in that game they clearly did not. But you mentioned Washington, and I'm glad you did because we want to talk a little bit about that Washington game now. We'll also talk about them in the last segment. So a lot still to talk about here on today's episode of Locked On Utes. But first, we want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of our episode today in our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs and use the created tools that help you find the right professional for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which make it easy and the best place to hire. And hiring is so easy, in fact, that they have so many qualified candidates that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's one of many reasons that LinkedIn Jobs is rated number 1 in small business, delivering quality hires for leading competitors. Post your job for free, LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Spencer, talking about the Utah-Washington game then, we just kind of talked about how the Oregon team was on a mission. They were clicking. They were doing their things right. And that game, Utah versus Washington, was not the case for Washington. They were not necessarily firing on all cylinders early. Utah actually jumped out to a lead, and Washington fought their way back in. And if you look at the game straight up score-wise, you would go, oh, essentially like what happened was that blocked field goal late in the game, Utah got the ball back. I've seen Cam Rising lead Utah down the field and make the necessary throws to win them those type of games before. And that game did end 35-28. The Huskies took it. And as much as I want to be like Cam Rising comes in, Brant Kuithe there too, that makes a difference. This Washington team, they're still undefeated for a reason. They continue to find ways to win. I don't feel like Utah, even with Cam and Brant, would have beaten this Washington team. It feels like it's their year. They have so many big and just primetime players that make a difference. Those pass rushers, the one even bringing like Cam and Brant back, that doesn't fix Utah's offensive line, which had their struggles throughout the season. And I do think Utah still would have lost to Washington in this one.
Here's the question that you have to ask. Would Cam Rising beat Washington by 10 or more points? On the road? Probably not.
So. I don't think so.
Probably not. So then you go to my next criteria when talking about Washington. If you're not going to beat them by 2 scores, so I guess at least 9 points, what is your game plan to be better than them execution-wise? You can't stop them in the clutch. You can't do it. Oregon hasn't been able to do it twice. Utah wasn't able to do it. Washington State wasn't able to do it. Texas wasn't able to do it. Yeah, it's a horns down kind of podcast, I guess. But I just look at what Washington did this year, and the reason I picked them going into the game against Texas and why I'm leaning towards picking them against Michigan is when the game is on the line, if Michael Penix is on the field and Roma Dunze's out there, game over. Game over. You put the ball in those guys' hands, there's nothing that you can do. And even if you bracket a Dunze, well, guess what? Then you get a one-on-one with either Polk or McMillan. Or they use their tight ends in really good moments. I mean, their offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, he was courted by Alabama in the offseason for a reason. He was somebody that was a highly sought-after coordinator target. I'm surprised he's not going to be a head coach next year. Maybe he still will be, but I think the window for everybody that he'd be interested in is kind of passed. So I guess he's just sticking it out with DeBoer as his OC. He said he wants to be a head coach, but honestly, he's making $2 million a year as Washington's OC, and I continue, I mean, as we're recording the show, to think more and more he's going to win a national championship on Monday night. So, I mean, it was just their year. It has been their year, and it feels like it'll continue to be their year on Monday, and the way that they just execute and win close games is unlike anything I've seen. They've won 10 games by 10 points or fewer in a row for the first time since like 1970 in college football. Like, they're a massive statistical outlier, and they could do that again. They'd be the first team, I think, in the modern era to win with a blue chip ratio under 50% on their roster. So I think that's just what Washington is, because if you've got a great quarterback and great receivers, you can overcome just about anything.
We'll talk about it a little bit, maybe just briefly, but I'm so excited for the national championship because, like you said, Washington seems like it's just their year, but Michigan in other ways as well, it might be theirs too. I think it's going to be a great game. But sticking with this Utah schedule prediction theme, like you said, Washington would win. I did not mean to skip the Arizona State game. I did forget though, just like literally off the top, that Utah won that game 55-3. So they would have not needed Cam Rising, pretty obviously. I genuinely forgot the score. I'm not even trying to shade you Sun Devils fans because a lot has happened since then. Moving on from that, that's right. We get to the Arizona game. Arizona was ranked 17th at that point, 42-18. Now, Cam Rising and Brant Kuithe being back doesn't change the fact that there was no Jonah Ellis in this game. There was no Cole Bishop in this game. Sione Baki was severely limited. Karene Reed was also out. But I do think the defense and just the team overall would have fought that little extra harder in this game because of the confidence they would have in Cam Rising being out there. And I've seen Cam Rising before, like the USC game that you brought up, where his defense is struggling and he's able to go blow for blow with a really good offense. So I think Cam would have kept Utah in this game. And based on the criteria, or not based on the criteria, but based on how we have the schedule playing out, Utah already lost to Oregon and Washington. I don't see them losing to Arizona if Cam's healthy. That's one where that Arizona team was hot. They did a number of good things, but they also did have their kind of late season near slip up against a Colorado where they nearly let the Buffs beat them late in the season. So while they were very good, they were not this unbeatable juggernaut. They were close to it, but
that was on the road though. That Arizona game against Colorado was on the road.
But it's Colorado. It's Colorado.
That's true. That's true. So I think the Arizona game is probably the toughest one to look back and try to assess because Arizona is a really good football team. You look at what they did in the Alamo Bowl. I know Oklahoma had a backup quarterback. Well, guess what? You know what a good team would do to a backup quarterback essentially on the road as he was, because it's, in Texas and Oklahoma, we don't have to do the geographical math right there. They'd beat him by 2 scores. Well, they beat him by 2 scores. They were significantly better. And I think that Arizona team was really good. And, I think it would have been a toss-up game rather than Arizona just wiping Utah out, which I did not expect. I picked Utah to win that game. I mean, if that felt like a Utah special, you lose one game and Kyle Whittingham hadn't lost 2 games in a while, and Arizona's good, but Kyle Whittingham, Jed Fish, both really good coaches, but I'll take Whittingham. And I mean, Arizona just came out and just from the jump. I mean, it was 20-0 before Utah could even get a first down.
That was a fun.
It was a fiasco. I mean, it was an ugly game for Utah. And so I don't think that all those factors can readily be overcome by Cam Rising. I think he helps make them competitive, but this is another one like the Oregon game that I think the outcome remains. I think here's where I stand on this. Between the Oregon State game and the Arizona game, 2 really good teams on the road. If Cam Rising's there, I think it's fair to say you get 1, but you're not getting 2.
Yeah, with the level those teams played, I can definitely see that. It would have been very hard for this Utah team to do, especially with some of the other injuries they still faced during the year. And it would have been interesting to see how things would have been different, but it was hard. It was Oregon and Washington's year. I just don't see Utah having the ability to three-peat. Of course, we both would have them taking care of business against Colorado in the final regular season game. I mean, heck, I made Cam healthy. They can get Shedeur healthy. I still like Utah in that scenario. And then, in the bowl game for Utah in this scenario, they actually would end up facing Oklahoma, who we brought up earlier, just based on how I kind of had it going standing-wise for the teams I would have Utah beating. And, of course, I would have Utah beating Oklahoma because Dylan Gabriel would have opted out the game still. So, while I think it'd be a close one, and I'm sure I'd lean Utah if that was the matchup, if Gabriel was healthy, but it wouldn't have even been a bowl game one. So it would have been a good year for Utah. They would have finished 11-2. I have them. Sounds like you have them with still 3 to 4 losses.
I think 9-3. I think Oregon, Washington, and 1 of Arizona and Oregon State.
Yeah. Which I think that's definitely how it could have played out too. So definitely a what if, and it's exciting that Cam will be back next year, so we can see how this Utah team does in the Big 12. I want to talk about the Utah-Washington game more with what Washington's doing. Spencer, really quick, because we were talking about Utah versus Arizona. Who is your, and we didn't even talk about this pre-show, early favorite to win the Big 12 for you? Who do you like better, Utah or Arizona right now?
Utah by a hair.
Okay.
The Cam Rising makes a significant difference there. I don't think Whittingham stays down, relatively speaking. I was very surprised at Utah's performance in the Las Vegas Bowl, to say the least, against Northwestern. I think that was a little disappointing, but I think it just showed why Cam Rising needs to come back for this team. And, we've seen 6th and 7th year veteran quarterbacks in college football have a lot of success. I think Cam Rising is going to be the next guy to thrive in, his umpteenth year of playing college football at the quarterback position. So I don't know how Utah and Arizona aren't the top 2 favorites. You could certainly put Kansas State and Oklahoma State in there. I think those are the traditional Big 12 teams that I'd say are most poised to have a conference championship caliber season. But after that, and even those two,
yeah, it
like
feels
Oklahoma State, I railed against them on my show all the time this year because they were such frauds. All year long when they started winning some games, and it's just a testament that the Big 12 just wasn't very good. Like that Oklahoma State played in your conference championship game. That's a testament to
you're mad at Oklahoma. Oklahoma, take care of business against your rival Bedlam. Last one, come on, give us the rematch.
It's just ridiculous. Like I know Ollie Gordon's a good player and everything like that. He's back for them next year, and that's a big thing because he's dynamic and really, really a fun guy to watch. I just looked at that team all year and was like, that's a fraudulent team. That team is not as good as you think. And going to the Big 12 championship game, I'd get asked about on my show about playoff scenarios and what could happen here. And I said, I'm telling you right now, Texas is going to dog walk Oklahoma State because Texas is a good team and Oklahoma State is not. And guess what? That game was never close. It was never close. You know why? Because Texas was significantly better than just about everybody they played. And Oklahoma caught lightning in a bottle, but Texas was the better team. And I think that played out throughout the course of the year. And I think that for Oklahoma State, like they're a good program. Year in and year out, Mike Gundy just wins a lot of football games. I think we've seen the ceiling. I mean, he can make a playoff appearance, especially in the 12-team era, but I don't think he's going to have a program or a team good enough to make a run there. And I think that Oklahoma State and Kansas State, those are the teams that impress me the most, or that I would look for the most to be at a championship level in 2024. But how do you not like Utah and Arizona with where they're at? Like the personnel they've got coming back. You've got Fafita and T-Mac returning for Arizona. You've got Jed Fish still at the head coaching spot. They haven't lost a coordinator as of yet. And there have been some rumors about their defensive coordinator, Johnny Nansen, going somewhere, but he hasn't left. So if he stays there, that side of the ball was dramatically improved. And you just have to like where they're at. And they're going to be a confident bunch. They're going to go into next year with 7 consecutive wins. And I think that means something to a program that's trying to climb out of the hole, and they've done that. So, yeah, I mean, I'd have Utah 1A, Arizona 1B, and then Oklahoma State and Kansas State, and then throw in whoever you want. I really don't think the conference champion next year will be someone that's not one of those 4. Like who? I mean, who would
still
it be?
Going to give us? I know it's weird to say. I'm still giving a sliver to Colorado because they have the best quarterback in the conference. I'm still giving them a sliver. It's the best He'll have the best quarterback in the conference. Sliver.
That's true. And their offensive line and everything will be improved.
It should be better.
They won 1 conference game.
I know.
I mean, they're going to win more games. You know why? Because they're in a worse conference. If you ran the Pac-12 back for 1 more year, Colorado would have 6-7 wins maximum next year.
Yeah, probably.
They're not. They're improving. And by the way, 6-7 wins would be an improvement upon this year.
Yes.
And this year was an improvement upon last year. But at the same time, you have to recognize they won the same number of conference games this year as last year. And the Pac-12 is much better than a bunch of other conferences, like top to bottom. And that was shown this year because Colorado beat TCU on the road in week 1 and beat Nebraska, and they beat them by like 20 points. Like they beat them comfortably. Those teams were fighting for bowl eligibility in their respective leagues, and they lost to a team that couldn't even win more than 1 league game. That's how much better the Pac-12 was this year.
That's true. And, obviously the team left representing the Pac-12 is Washington. And I want to talk about the significance of Washington still remaining and a little bit more on that close game that Utah played with them and how we can reflect and look back on that in one quick moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about our friends at UCCU. The UCCU mobile banking app, Learn and Earn. It's the app that pays your entire family to learn about money. Kids look to parents to become more financially literate. Parents don't always know the answers. Learn and Earn breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized educational games like quizzes and trivia. Every time a family member completes a topic, they earn points that can occur and can be redeemed for gift cards at stores like Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and more. There is age-appropriate content for every member of the family who can compete against each other and track their progress on leaderboards. Learn and Earn is inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so you can play it anytime, anywhere. The more you play, the more you learn. And the more you learn, the more you earn. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning Be Money Smart Youth Banking Program, helping kids, teens, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. UCCU. Love where you bank. All right, Spencer, to close this one out, Washington is now playing in the national championship. I think it's fantastic. I can't wait to see the game between them and Michigan. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, as I said, and I really think both sides have a great case as to why they could very well be the national champions at the end of that contest. But reflecting back on Utah's game against Washington, we talked about it briefly, but when you look at that, it's one of those things like, wow, it's crazy to think that Utah almost beat the team that is in the national championship now. But they weren't the only ones to say that. Arizona State can also say that, and several other. I think they've played 10 consecutive. Their last 10 wins, last 9 wins have come by 10 points.
10 straight wins by 10 points or less.
Yeah, it's insane. They've been living on the edge a little bit in that way, but
that is an insane stat.
They've continued to find ways to win, and that's where you have to give them credit, because to me, Utah almost beating Washington is more so about, it's not like, oh my gosh, Utah was in Washington's class. It's more a matter of just any given Saturday, that because there is talent on both sides of the field in both positions, and how much the coaching aspect can matter too. Because I thought Kenny Dillingham did some really nice things in the Arizona State game that they played. I thought the same thing with Utah, that they had some nice tricks up their sleeve. And you have a talented player like Devon Vele, who didn't have the type of year he was hoping for, but that game, it was all clicking that day. You have talent and guys who can still make plays and do things on particular days. But the difference between a team like a Washington and Utah, especially this year, is continuing to find ways to win, the consistency overall. And the one thing that Washington has too is they have great collegiate players on both sides of the ball that are the difference makers, that when you need it most, you already mentioned it, that clutch gene that they had, that they were able to step up and make those big plays when it mattered.
Yeah, I mean, that's just been their MO all year long, is you need a big play, Penix to Odunze. Time and time again, whether it's on a reverse, back shoulder, fade, slant, it doesn't matter. Grubb is always dialing up the right play, and it's always, going to be made, because Penix is just so ridiculously accurate. It's
incredible.
It's an incredible thing to watch, because it's just over and over and over again. And you just wonder how he's able to be that consistent. I mean, when he misses a long throw, you're kind of caught off guard, because you go, wait, he misses those?
I know.
I didn't know that happens. I didn't know that was allowed to happen. That's weird. So I think that for Washington, they've just been so clutch. Like I said earlier, the more I talk and think on this show, the more I think I'm picking Washington on Monday, because by the way, Michigan's offense is not very good.
Okay, whoa. Not very good is a strong is not. In what term are they not very good? Like, what do you mean?
JJ McCarthy is so mid. Not bad, mid. He is a mid-tier quarterback in college football. The NFL hype around him is patently the NFL hype around him is patently ridiculous. If he goes in the first round, he's the next Mac. He's Mac Jones with legs. That's what he is. He's Mac Jones with legs, and he doesn't have the receivers.
He could be Josh Rosen. At least Mac had the
100%
good year.
He could be. Yeah, he could. I've never been a huge JJ McCarthy fan. When he took over for Cade McNamara, I was like, okay, so he brings a mobility element, which is, by the way, better for Michigan's offense. He makes plays that McNamara cannot. Cade McNamara also got to the college football playoff, though. And McCarthy did the same thing last year. And he threw 2 pick sixes, and he threw a pick on the first play against Alabama.
Yes, he did.
And then, the guy's heel was on the sideline.
I know, it's so lucky. He was lucky.
Every time I watch him, I'm utterly unimpressed. He's a capable, competent quarterback. Obviously, his team's 14-0. You can't be incompetent and be in that position. But the I always thought the Heisman hype early in the year, I was like, that's not going to last. Fact check, it did not. The NFL hype, I think, is ridiculous. And so if you're giving me a game in which you've got the best offense, I think, in all of college football, certainly the best passing offense.
Yes,
I think if they don't have Dylan Johnson, that's a loss. But, if they can only run for 50 yards a game, guess what? Penix is going to throw for 400. So who cares? And, you can talk about Michigan's defense, and it is much better than Texas's. That is very true. But Washington can neutralize what Michigan does well, which is win with physicality up front, because their offensive line is sick. It's really good. It won the Joe Moore Award for a reason. Line too. It's very good. So I think Washington is they're a better overall team than people give them credit for, but everyone's starting to understand what Pac-12 fans have known all season long. Michael Penix and those receivers are as good as we've seen in college football in the last 20 years. Only passing attack I'd put over him, Joe Burrow in 2019 LSU.
Yeah, I mean, they give you vibes of that one, even like those Ohio, like just a recent memory, like, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and CJ Stroud. Like that group is.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison. I think they're on footing with those guys, and I think their overall team is better because their offensive line is better.
Mm-hmm. And the pass rushers too. I mean, it's phenomenal. And you were dumping on McCarthy. I'll just say this: Penix absolutely should have been the Heisman to me. I think that was another game where I watched it again, and I like Jaden Daniels. I think he did a number of good things, but I just feel like that's where the Pac-12 bias a little bit really hurt Penix. And I think if he played for an SEC school, and I think if Washington for some reason was an SEC school, like we take everything about them and we trade him with the other purple school, LSU, I think he probably wins the Heisman. So that's the other thing I watched.
So I agree, and I think that that's a shame in many ways. I think Penix would rather have a national championship, obviously, but
yes.
Did he have a Heisman caliber season? Yes, absolutely. Yes. He finished second for a reason. If the jerseys had been swapped, yeah, I think he would have won it. I agree. I will say the Oregon fan in me is going to come out here for just a moment. Bo Nix was the betting favorite to win the Heisman going into the Pac-12 championship game. And I think if Oregon had won, Bo Nix would have won. And for all the crap and flack that Oregon takes from fans that are not fans of the University of Oregon for the bodacious campaign or being flashy or being, all that sort of stuff, the uniforms, the facilities, Phil Knight, Nike, everything like that. For all the crap it takes, Bo Nix was going to win that Heisman if Oregon wins the game, and Michael Penix was not. And Washington doesn't operate like Oregon, and Washington's better than Oregon this year. But if you don't think that there is,
I know that hurts. I know that hurts.
It does. If you don't think there is value in brand awareness and power in college football, I think you are sorely mistaken. And Washington tried to hype up their Heisman campaign this year, but Oregon is a stronger national brand than Washington. That is a fact. And that clearly played into the Heisman discussion because Penix he's the nation's leading passer on an undefeated Power 5 champion. And he didn't win the Heisman this year. You know why? Because not everyone's staying up to watch West Coast football. That's a part of it. Christian McCaffrey was a part of that too. But Bo Nix was I think, going to win the Heisman had Oregon won that Pac-12 championship game. And the only difference is the jersey that those guys are wearing. So if there are any Washington fans that see or hear that, it might not be very popular. And I'm totally okay with that. But that is reality. You don't have to like it, but that is reality. Branding matters 100%. And I think it doomed Penix.
I remember very vividly the bodacious campaign, like all the things that Oregon was doing for Bo Nix. You know what gimmicky thing I remember about Michael Penix most?
They put him on a bus.
Desmond Howard talking about is the energy on College Game Day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh boy, that was we don't need to do that.
We do not. Spencer, appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks, man.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but we'll be back with you tomorrow talking about Jonah Ellis's departure and other news pertaining to all things Utah football. We'll see you then.